allpointstv.com for another edition of the program called What's Going On. And we are delighted, happy that you're here with us this afternoon. And we are going to stun you today with a great program. Would you be surprised we have a great program? If not, then that means that you've been watching the program for a while. We've had some good programs on some topics. A couple of them I want to revisit. And then there's one I want to open up for the first time today, and that's the one that comes out of Article 2, Section 2, Clause 1 of the Constitution, which is the pardon clause of the document. And I want to try to expand upon that a little bit because I think Biden has pardoned. I think I read a report where Biden had pardoned 8,000 people, and that's half the that's half the country. He pardoned everybody, pardoned all his family members. They had to be pardoned because they were on the tape. And I was waiting to see how many that person was going to pardon. There are very few of them that he pardoned that I was surprised by because I knew he had to pardon the J6 committee. There's nowhere in the world those guys be left hanging out there because all of them had baggage in terms of what they were doing because all that was in fact parasitic behavior. And they were covering, one of the things they were going to find out if they were ever brought to heel is those documents, because that the destruction of those documents that they were using to go after Donald Trump, to have gotten rid of those documents, to shred those documents like they did, and those documents don't even exist. Let's say had a backup copy somewhere that we don't know about right now. Those documents are gone, deliberately destroyed, so nobody can look over their shoulders and do an oversight. I'm gonna get to that later on. I want to, before getting to that, that's the main topic I want to cover today. But before getting to that, I want to talk about a few things I've been writing about on Facebook, because, and I'm not bragging about this, but if you're not reading what I'm writing about the Kennedy. I've been writing a few articles anticipating the release of the last documents they have in the government's files, and I'm going to assume that they are going to be true to Donald Trump's claim and certainly not hide anything. I think Donald Trump does have an intent to release all the documents the government has. I'm not so sure. I'm not so sure that I can trust the government. I don't trust our government. And I think Trump's an honest broker. I think he's going to release. He said that this last time and looked at the document. I think some of the things in there were horrifying to him, and he then backed up a little bit from doing that. Some of the people that were in these agencies had gotten to him and convinced him that that's not necessarily a good idea to do that. And I guess part of it was the fact that you would undermine the stability of the government by people losing confidence. Of course, if you're not lost confidence in the government by now, you probably would never be able to, nothing they can do to make you lose confidence in the government, because everything they've done, none of what they've done in the last, let's see, how many years would it be? Nothing they've done recently certainly would be confidence building. You couldn't claim that. I mean, what do you think we could hang our hat on in terms of we got confidence in the government because the government has done X, Y, and Z? What would that be, by the way? The XYZ affair. Another one. This would be another XYZ affair. What would that affair be that would have built confidence in the government that's in Washington? I can't think of anything, and I would love to hear any one to have another view of it that can come up. They can come up with something, because I can't think of anything. I just wonder. I wonder where this is going. Anyway, I've been writing on Facebook because I wanted to get out in front of the release of any documents that are coming, because I know this case pretty much, and I think better than most. I've been watching it. I've been looking at this evidence for a long time, reading all the books that are out there on it. And I can tell you that, and there's some very good books out there. Mark Lane was the first one that began to raise the question about this ridiculous report, this work of fiction, which is what the Warren Commission report is. If anybody claims that that is a found word or anything that has to do with the assassination of John F. Kennedy, you got to go read that report in order to become what's the word here, where you will not have any illusions about what this report, if you can call it that, this cover up is what it amounts to. Because the Warren Commissioners, and they had some what they did was assemble a team that they knew you would have confidence in, and that you would take their word for it, because they were some of the marquee figures in American society at that time. There was, let me see if I can name them. There were 7 of them on the Warren Commission, and they got them from all of the particulars of the government, and certainly by putting Earl Warren, we had a lot more confidence in our leaders at that time than we have now. So they thought certainly putting Earl Warren, whose arm they twisted, quite frankly, to place him over the committee that was supposedly investigating what happened in Dallas on the 22nd of November, 1963. The idea was that these persons would get to the truth, the whole truth and nothing but the truth. And they had such a reputation for integrity that any claims they were making would therefore be above board. Who would claim that the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, maybe they hadn't heard of John Marshall, but who would ever assume that you can't trust the government leaders? I mean, everybody questions them today, but who would have done that in 1963?
Do you think the JFK assassination and basically at least an apt handling and investigation of it is a big reason why Americans are more suspicious?
John, I think all of the pundits are saying that is the cutoff part, where on this side there was this particular view, and on the other side there's another view. And I think we're on that other side right now, where people have gotten to the point of questioning everything. And I can remember where I was when the report came across that the president had been assassinated. I can remember that. I was in college at that time. It was in my sophomore year. And I remember going hearing about it on my way to class. And I'm sitting in that classroom. It was an English class I was going to. I'm sitting in that class and I'm stunned. I cannot believe in 1963 that a president of the United States could be assassinated. Of course, I knew about the other 3, but those were distant memories. And here was something happening in the time period, the contemporary time period in which we all were living at that point. And it was just unbelievable that could happen. But I began to immediately set out at that point to find out as much as I could about it, because it was going from the absurd from the unbelievable to the absurd, because Kennedy was assassinated on 22nd November, and then 2 days later, the person that assassinated him, supposedly, Lee Harvey Oswald, was murdered 2 days later. And that just, I'm sitting at this. I think I'm sitting in this at that point. I'm now in my in a history class, I believe it was, Mrs. Harrell's class, and then the report came out that Oswald had been shot. And now I'm here. I'm a sophomore, but I'm not stupid. I mean, I'm just barely in college. 1 foot in high school back 2 years earlier, and now 1 foot in college 2 years later. And this just is astounding to me, because I'm just as starry-eyed as anybody else is at that point. But John, after that happened, I'm not starry-eyed anymore. I began to raise the question right then: how can this be going on? And then 5 years later, I'm now teaching in the junior high school, and King is assassinated April the 4th, 1968. And then in June of that year, Robert F. Kennedy is assassinated, going into the really in the pantry, going through the cafeteria to get out of the place where he had spoken. And who could have anticipated that he would be going in that place to get out of there, and then could be shot in a back room kind of situation? And it just began to just stun. No matter how naive you were, and I was pretty naive at that point. I admit I was starry-eyed because I'm just like most persons were up until recently, but they're not there now. Oh boy, people have changed. But I was that starry-eyed person. I can understand the condition that people are in, because number one, you want to believe in the best that you can believe in as far as the integrity of the person leading the country. Because if that's not true, then what does that say about your inertia in terms of doing anything about it? So some of it is the fact that our inactivity in terms of holding people's feet to the fire and holding people accountable, part of it is that we have not done a good job of that, and we want to make a self-indictment that we dropped the ball, as well as those persons that are in fact involved in the governing process. So some of it is a denial of our own role in this demagoguery. Can I use that word? This demagoguery is going on because we've been demagoguing our government for a long time, trying to make claims about the government that have no credence in any of the evidence about the government. But I was starry-eyed about it. I'm just as starry-eyed. I can't knock it because I've been there and I've done that. I'm not there anymore, but I was there then. I was very starry-eyed when I went to college. I thought I'm the person that thought I couldn't believe that when I went to my first college class, took a test. I'm so starry-eyed in terms of being in the college that I couldn't believe they cheated in the university. Boy, did I get a wake-up call. I couldn't believe they cheated in college. And I couldn't believe when I took the first test. I'm in there burning midnight oil, and I'm in the classroom, and people got their books open. I'm sitting there watching this. I couldn't believe it. So I was starry-eyed. So no, I'm not making a criticism of people that are still starry-eyed, but you need to wake up. It's too late for that now. There's too much evidence out there, and too much water has come under that bridge for us to still be at that level of understanding. But at that point, what do we have to go by? All we had was a mythology. I mean, we could have done more underneath the surface examination of things, but who would have done that, given the fact that everything was pretty much latent and passive? People were not going to raise their eyebrows, and certainly the people that were running things were not going to share information about what they were doing. So we didn't have a lot to go by. But when you start seeing all the people getting shot, and a president getting assassinated, look, that began to raise a lot of questions. And we kept waiting for the information, and we finally got it. Half of us didn't believe it, and I started at that point. I started my research on it really once the Warren Commission report came out the following year, 1964. I started my own research on it at that point. I've been researching this issue ever since. I don't think they're going to be able to show me anything in those files that I've not already thought about or come across. And I'll be honest with you, I don't expect a lot from the. I don't think that they've come 62 years later at this point, after the fact of what happened in Dealey Plaza in Dallas, Texas in 1963. I don't think they've come this far, this long, to now turn around and tell us, "Oops, we lied." I don't think I don't think that they are at that level of being able to come clean with the American people. Not when they're continuing to lie to the American people. Some other stuff. Not maybe. I mean, why would they in fact open up one corridor, which raised the question about the other corridor that are closed off? And then if they admit to doing that over 62 years, then what are they telling us the truth about? I have some ideas about how this is the Big Bang theory. I have a lot of things that I don't accept, and one of them is what you have to watch in terms of what Elon Musk is doing, because Elon Musk is into rocketry, and he knows what the capabilities are. You ought to hear what he's saying. It ain't just Candace Owens, folks. I'm sorry. There's a lot of things the government has been lying to the American people about. And this is one of the areas that they have been lying about to the American people for 62 years. I just don't think they then turn around and just admit and open up to the American people that we lied. And then what does that do? What does it do to the national consciousness? It doesn't build confidence in the government structures and institutions. What it does is undermines them, because they realize about something this extraordinary and then do it for this longer period of time.
We have a comment too here.
Okay, good.
The FBI and Warren report don't come close to matching. No, so they don't. The FBI report and the Warren report, I guess they don't have. I've heard about that myself.
Yeah.
There was like real inconsistent.
Well, they did, yeah, and I'm glad the person called in that. But the government itself contradicted in 1978 when they had the House report that then came middle ground. I mean, people didn't accept the Warren Commission report, so what they did go middle ground, and the middle ground was that the probability. This is how they do it. They won't come out and say that the report is fallacious. I mean, how do you make that claim and then be a government making a report on itself and therefore doing a self-investigation? That's going to happen next week. But it came out in '78 with the committee that was headed by Stokes and Representative Stokes, and he I think was out of Cleveland. He was out of Cleveland, and they went halfway. They went middle ground. I mean, you don't believe this, so would you? It's like you don't believe this hand. So what about if I put that in other hand, but not as much, but some of it? And then you say, well, do you believe this? And then they slap you with the other hand while you're not watching. But the government it really has a wrestle with itself right now in terms of what happens when you open up that Pandora's box. And I know this case very well. And there are some things that I do know. I'm just waiting to see the report come out, quite frankly. I want to see how it is. I want to see how congruent it is with that which I already know. What I'm looking for in the files is how much of the puzzle that I don't have, and not too much that I do not have at this point, because I know who the killers were. I know who the shooters were, and I want to see how much of it fills in some of the holes that I'm not be able to fill in through my own research. But I've done research on this case, and I just don't think. I just want to see what I'm going to wait. I'm going to be patient. I waited this long from when I was that starry-eyed 18-year-old, because in my sophomore year I was 18 years old, because I got into college when I was 17, and was I in fact unconscious? Is there a certain thing as unconscious consciousness? I was unconsciously.
Well, so you're aware of the stuff on your agenda. The day-to-day operations. But that's what it is. It's a distraction. I mean, you're more worried about paying your bills, getting the back and forth work so you can pay your bills, keeping yourself so you can go back and forth. Keeping the car going. So the politicians are like basically they've above that because what they do is they get themselves in position so they can take as much money as they choose to, find a way of funneling money whenever they need it without detection, and they can keep on going. So the rest of us got to maintain a front where we actually have to have a legitimate job and stay with that legitimate job. So that's that's how they do it. Because distractions.
Yeah, and you could not have told me back in that time period that we had politicians on the take. I couldn't believe that at that time. I remember one time I walked into the room and they said, I heard the announcer. We only had 3 stations then, and the announcer said, "And ladies and gentlemen, the president of the United States." I was walking through the room, and when I heard him say the president of the United States, I stopped in mid tracks because I wanted to listen to the voice of the president. And I was surprised when the voice, this is how brainwashed I was surprised when the voice of the president, I'm about maybe in 8th grade at this time, and I didn't, he sounded like another human being. I thought the way they had the president built up, and we were so patriotic in the schools and that, I mean, stand up and hold your hand over your heart and say the Pledge of Allegiance and have the prayer before the school day opens up, and you start with prayer in the auditorium and things like that. I went to those kind of schools. And so I'm kind of like, I'm patriotic. I don't think you are brainwashed when you're patriotic. I think you are brainwashed when you do not question the basis of the patriotism. I mean, what is it based upon? And then I'm in this thing right now where I wrote about this the other day too. I said in my writing, I don't believe anything my government tells me.
Same listener also said, I didn't know this. You might have known it because you investigate more. George Bush Sr., the old man, the first one, he was the CIA director in Dallas the same day.
Yes, he was.
I didn't know that.
He was there, John. He was. Who is this person? No, I know that he may not want his name.
His name is Shane. Shane.
Yeah.
Shane. So he's joining us from YouTube.
From YouTube. Yeah. Bush was there. There were a lot of people that were there, John. You'd be surprised of the person that were in Dealey Plaza on the 22nd of November. And in Dallas, they were a lot of folks were there, and George Herbert Walker Bush, George W. Bush's father, who was later on the director of the CIA, was in Dealey Plaza. And there were a lot of people that were there for what the rumor was a big event. I will tell you this. I wrote about this the other day on Facebook in a 2-part series. One person that read my post said, "I don't say I can be able to do this in two narratives." And I told her, well, part 2 gonna be longer, and it was longer. I didn't finish everything I wanted to say, but I was able to say a lot within those two and this 2-part series that I wrote. But yeah, this if they were stalking Kennedy. Kennedy was being stalked, and fate was against him in Dallas because if that weather had not broken, they had the orders that if the weather was still bad, it had been raining, and if the weather was still bad, and they had that dome over the limousine, then just walk away, look for another opportunity another day, and possibly another city, if not in Dallas. And it didn't happen to Miami earlier because Miami was where word was out that there was some security problems, and they flew the president from the site to his speaking engagement. So he went over the city and did not go through it when he went to Chicago. But they were going to get him in Chicago, or get him in Miami. In Chicago, there's another thing going on there. But what I'm putting together here and telling you is this, and this is from my research. And I will tell you this, that the only reason they didn't get Kennedy in Chicago which was another stop-off point. But that was too close for comfort for those that were actually part of the mob apparatus. Chicago was the home base of Sam Giancana, John Rosselli, and some of the others. But that network, I even think that, Charles Nicoletti, that was just too close to the home front. And the reason why that was kind of off limits was because that sniper's nest that was found there. It'd be the first. I mean, with Richard Daley there, that'd be one of the first places you look. So that was just too hot. But that was too hot for comfort. The person that called in was saying that George Herbert Walker Bush was in Dallas. That's true. Nixon was there too. I'm not sure. I'm not saying that they were in the know, but it was not a big secret that something big was going to happen, and just what that was yet to materialize. But there's no doubt about the fact in the aftermath of it that people found out what the big surprise was about, because one of the person that was surprised by it big time was Lee Harvey Oswald. It's only after the assassination that Oswald was clear about how he had been set up to do what? To take the blame for it. Because I'll tell you this, and nobody's going to contradict me on this, Oswald didn't shoot anybody. I don't care what the files say. Lee Harvey Oswald, who was murdered by Jack Ruby. Oswald, by the way, Jack Ruby was there in Dealey Plaza. He was on the same side, didn't do any shooting. He was on the same side as one of the shooters that's over there in that Grassy Knoll area. This was a well-planned execution. And it was much wider than, this is why the Warren Commission report, it's just ridiculous for this report to be able to have stood up as anything other than the fiction that it is. It belongs in the children's fiction section. Because it's amazing that it stood up as a report on the assassination of John F. Kennedy. It's not a report on the assassination of John F. Kennedy. It is a cover-up of what occurred because, as J. Edgar Hoover said, we must convince the American people, and this report was about convincing the American people that a single person had done this. Well, if he was Flash, I wouldn't believe it. And you'd have to be Flash in order to believe what they said happened in Dealey Plaza. Because the president, I'm contending this. I don't think anybody said this before. I don't think none of the reports have made this claim. Kennedy was shot 4 times. So you better have a couple of magic bullets in this case, because one bullet was ricocheting off bones and bouncing up and down and going in different directions, and it created 7 wounds. So this is what the report would say. This was created by the guy that eventually became was a representative from Pennsylvania.
Also, the same listener actually says too. He's put forth this idea that, well, John Jr., John F. Kennedy Jr. Put out his magazine. It was called George, George, G-O, because he knew who killed his dad and wanted in the know. So maybe that was it. I mean, maybe he was. That's interesting. I never heard of that possibility, that connection. So I mean, I just thought I'd add that too, because I want to make sure that the listener knows we're including him in the conversation. So
well, John, you know what, the way the government operates is that it has many corridors and quarters, and so if you're trying to connect the dots, it's almost impossible to do it from one of the corridors of power, because there's several corridors in which decisions are in fact made, and decisions are made on a need to know basis, so that if you're in this particular corridor, you won't know necessarily all the things that are happening elsewhere. What you know is your assignment, or what you have been brought into in the activity that's getting ready to be carried out in the government's name. But no one person has all that information. So I'm not making an indictment here saying that everyone that was in Dallas was aware that the hit was on, but you have to understand how the government operates. It's like you're inside of a beltway of information, and it's like I did the experiment in class one time where you tell somebody something over here, and you want to hear what it is at the other side of the room when it gets to the last person, and the message gets all blurred. I never did find. I did experiment several times in the classroom, and I never once found the what it started out being. It didn't resemble any of that by the time I got over there. But everybody had something about it. But what was said at the initial stage, that wasn't it at the end. And it's like you hear a little bird says something, and another bird takes it and then tweaks it a little bit different than it was said to that little bird. And before you know it, everybody's tweeting it, but it changes every time it's being tweeted. And so there were people there. The people were aware that there was something big getting ready to happen. What it was, I think some of the ones that were there because they had heard something was getting ready to happen, I think they were surprised when what did happen took place. I think some were shocked by that. I think that Lee Harvey Oswald was shocked by it because, and this has not been made public, but I'm going to tell you this: Lee Harvey Oswald was working for the CIA.
Well, it always begs the question. He officially denounced his U.S. citizenship, went to the Soviet Union. Then he came back with a Soviet wife.
Yeah, let me tell you this: you don't just walk off and then walk back like that. That's not how it works. And when he went to Russia, they kind of knew that something's going on here, and they were watching Lee Harvey Oswald over there because they didn't believe this guy was the defector. They knew that he was an asset, and they treated him that way and kept things from him because of that. They didn't trust Oswald over there. This is how they operate. You see, for example, I give you an example of with John F. Kennedy. John F. Kennedy is on the pillow with the same woman that was the Judith Exeter was the name. She's the girlfriend of Sam Giancana. I mean, later on, he's in love with one of the McGuire sisters, but they were sharing the same bedmate in that. The way that you may be surprised of the fact that this Quisling that is from California was sleeping with this Chinese spy, Fang. That's how the intelligence that's how they operate. And when Oswald went over there, let's say with Oswald's case, they didn't believe that denunciation into that stuff. They knew Oswald was a plant. He was a plant. But he didn't know what. I mean, he knew what they were asking him to do: go here, go there, to go for kind of things. Had him under the name of Hydel and things like that, and ordering a $12.95 rifle to purchase that through the mail service. Put your name on it and so on and so forth, and then you have the name that can trace back to you, and you have a underground name. He didn't know why. He didn't know that these were things being planted, so that later on, the varsity team, because there are two teams here. One's a mob, And the other one is the varsity. That's the CIA. These are the varsity. The government is the varsity. And when Oswald finally, what really, I want person to go and look at something here and ask yourself this question. This to be a starting point. Lee Harvey Oswald was supposed to be on the 6th floor of the school book depository building on the street on the corner of Ames and Houston. So when that car going north turns left and goes west and does something it should not have done, and no security team that's serious would have allowed it to happen, where the president has to slow down to make that turn off of Houston onto Elm Street, making a left turn, having to curve around, went right under that building where the shooter was supposed to be on the 6th floor of that building. That building is on the corner of Houston and Elms. That 6th floor is supposed to have one of the killers right there. Now ask yourself this question. If that car is underneath that window and is that close, it would be much more difficult target later on. It slowed down to 11.67 miles an hour at that point. Ask yourself the question of what shot later on would be better than that shot right there at that point. The car's right there. It was like shooting fish out of a barrel, in a barrel. And what does that tell you? That the shooting doesn't start there, but a more difficult shot where the shots are coming as the president is going away from that building. What does that tell you? I'll tell you what it told me when I began to investigate this. It tells me that the person that is in that building, is one of the shooters, but he knows about those other shooters in that area too, because of the firing squad in Dealey Plaza. Yeah, thank you. We'll do that. Okay, so go back and look at this again and begin to research so that when you find out this phenomenon that's happening now under people like Joe Biden, you won't be surprised to find out that Joe Biden did what had never been done before. And we're talking about pre-pardons. Because if you look through my lens, where I'm that starry-eyed kid who could not imagine government being as corrupt as it is, you can see here that Joe Biden was not only pardoning people that were had been accused or charged. For example, the persons that were in the demonstration on J6 of 2021, January 6, 2021. Trump pardoned 1,500 persons that had been convicted of what they claim was an insurrection, and so those persons had been charged with a crime. But can you imagine persons that would have to have foreknowledge to then go and pick out people that he's going to exonerate from federal penalty, before they even charged, such as the J6 committee. And they were going to be charged if that had not happened, and maybe charged even in the aftermath of it, because I'm not so sure you can do what Biden did. I don't think it's ever been done. I never read about it being done before. I don't know of any cases of it where you're going to actually do something at the magnitude. This man was supposedly, I read one report, this man pardoned 8,000 people. 8,000 people. What kind of government do we have if 8,000 people have to be pre-pardoned? You know what does that tell you? It tells you that we got a criminal enterprise. Our government is a criminal enterprise in Washington. You are pardoning everybody in Washington D.C. I mean, that's figuratively speaking. And so when you take what I'm saying about Kennedy and extrapolate it back from that time period onto the present, conditions, and you're not starting at the starting point that I started. See, I know you can recover from because nobody started back any further from this level of consciousness that I'm in now to where I was before. And that is that George Moss is so far out of here. I can barely recognize that I was ever at that point in time, but I was. I believed in the. I still believe in the vision of the. I certainly believe in the vision of the framers. I just don't believe in the people who murdered that vision. Those are the ones I'm talking about. And everybody that followed after George Washington, quite frankly, I don't know any of them that stand out after George Washington. You can claim this one and that one was great. I'm not going to argue with you about your own view of it, but I'll tell you, George Washington stands above the fray, and all this other make believe stuff they do in terms of this one's great, that one's great, this one over here is great. All that you can take that and hurl that out there to the wind, because what makes a president great is that, or anyone great, is that he sets a mold to which no one else who would have lived in that point in time could have done the job any better, or could have set a mold for others that would come afterwards to put their feet in there and plant their feet deep in a mold already made for them. And the only one who's done that in our history, quite frankly, is George Washington, because George Washington created the mold for all the presidents. He's the one that set up the two-term limit until Roosevelt broke it in 1940. This idea of limiting the president's power didn't come from the Congress. They did it in the 22nd Amendment. But the idea of the limitation of the president's power came from the president, the first one that did it. He stepped down voluntarily on 2 occasions. This unusual man that we had at the very beginning that set a mold for all the other presidents, and they're walking in George Washington's shoes. If we understood that, he'd be up there on Mount Rushmore by himself. His image would be. I got to tell you something else too, as while we're on this point. Today in the paper, there was a report. This is my article for the day on it, was that CNN announced James Acosta, Jim Acosta, you call him James. I call him James Acosta because I don't want to seem too familiar with him. James Acosta, the one that President Trump in his first term had to tell him to give up the microphone. The man wouldn't even give the microphone up. It's in a presidential press conference, and you saw the Washington the president's aide trying to get the microphone from him so she could pass it to somebody else. He wouldn't even allow her to take the microphone. She up there harassing him to get the microphone from him, and that's when Donald Trump said, "Don't be rude. Don't be rude." He should have took his own microphone and popped him one. But he was announced this morning, and you know I had to write about this one. He announced this morning that Acosta has resigned from CNN, and the reason why he resigned, you see, they didn't ask him to. They didn't fire him. What they did is to put him on the night shift, not the song by the Commodores, but the night shift in terms of put him up there in the journalistic equivalent of Siberia. And the idea was they're gonna make him walk away because it was so embarrassing. Nobody was watching the CNN start out with, and they put him down there in a shift where nobody's watching. Even fewer viewers are watching. It's a message in there, and they sent a message to him, and he took the message and had enough um, I can't say he had enough character. The man doesn't have any character, but he had enough character to step down after he saw they were putting him over there in that night shift, the graveyard shift, and he knew that that was a message they were sending from the top. A guy named Thompson, that was the CEO, was sending a message to him. He got the message, and he his stepped down. That's a good thing for the American people. But I must tell you this: the liberal, when Jim Acosta did that to Donald Trump in the media, all that should have done is bring people's attention to the media's role in a whole lot of things that have been going on in this country, and what the media has been doing, starting with Kennedy. And maybe not just starting with Kennedy, but that's where it becomes more brazen. And that was the media knew better than what they were saying. They kept their mouth quiet when the Warren Commission report came out. They knew that what the media was saying, what that report was saying, was not true, and the media did not challenge it. So therefore, we didn't challenge it because we believe what was in writing, and we believe what's on television. The media knew. No bullet could have done these flip flops and going up and down and going and creating all that damage. One bullet doing that, and they knew it because John Connolly, who was in the middle seat, has said as much, and it was covered up by the press. That's what began to stun me when I began to do this research on what was going on here, because the media was an accomplice to the cover up, and they still are. And I said today, I think it was either today or yesterday, I said in my post that the coup d'etat, the meet that was run against Richard Nixon, was the coup d'etat. I was saying that, and I said that today because in reference to Jim Acosta, I wanted to make sure that people knew that Jim Acosta was not the first one to do the things he did in terms of disrespecting the presidential office the way that he did. The first time that I saw it was when Dan Rather did it. And you may recall him. Some of you are too young probably for this one. But you remember during the Watergate when Dan Rather was constantly approaching Nixon because they knew they were going to get him one way or the other. And Nixon asked Dan Rather, Mr. Rather, are you running for anything? You must be running because the way you're doing this questioning, you must be running for some kind of office yourself. And he said, are you running for anything? He kind of did a little smirk. And Dan Rather should have maintained his journalistic presence and went on to ask what question he wanted to raise. But he then said this in his insolence, not to Nixon, but to the presidential office. I want to make that very clear. It's the presidential office that must be respected if you don't respect the person. And when Dan Rather came back instantly and said, no, Mr. President, are you? He's been thrown out of there at that point. Because you need to know who you're talking to. You're talking to the single office holder of the United States of America. The only office holder in whom every person in the country is allowed to vote for that person. And he's the only one like that. Not the senators, not the members of the House, not certainly any of the cabinet members, not the members of the Supreme Court. And because of that status that office holder has, that's what you must take into consideration, because what you're doing through him, and maybe at some point her, but not her today, but him in the past and now today, You're talking to the person that is the embodiment of the entirety of the American people. And it does not get more serious than that. And that's who you're talking to. The President of the United States. And people need to understand that. In the shooting of Kennedy, they were not just shooting at Kennedy, but the implication was they were shooting at the people they were shooting at the whole people who had made it possible for him to sit in that office. I understand all the particulars of what went on in 1960. I'm very much aware of that. But once the country has installed that office holder, he in that office there at that point represents the totality of the American people. And to bring about what happened in Dallas as a result of that, whatever the grievances were, and I'm very much aware of all the grievances that were around him at that point in time. I'm very much aware through the reading of the book called the Mafia CIA Link, and there was a link between the Mafia and the CIA. Discordant groups that had discordant interests, but there was some interest they had in common that made them that developed an alliance between them. You know, I was saying this earlier. Here's one thing that I was very surprised when I first began to see, when I began to really investigate the Kennedy case. I was really surprised. I asked myself the question: how are these officers, all of a sudden showing up wherever Oswald was? He's in that theater. How did all of them all of a sudden converge on that theater when that man had been accused of going to the theater and not buying a ticket? How many persons slip into the theater when nobody's looking and try to get in there free to watch a movie? Why did all those persons show up at that point in time? That's a question. I know the answer to the question, but that's a question to be asked. If you slip into a theater, do you have 12 officers show up on the scene at that point in time? Of course not. So why would Lee Harvey Oswald be in that theater, and why are they all there? But somebody that sneaked into the theater, and why would you think that person would be the one that was in the Dallas School Book Depository? Well, you say, well, he worked there, and that's where the shots came from. Yeah, but a whole lot of folks worked there, and some of them left the building because when you tell them that the president killed, who wants to go back to work after lunch hour was over? A whole lot of them went home. But why are they at that theater? I tell you why he was there at that theater. Because here's the deal. Lee Harvey Oswald went to that theater to meet his CIA controller, and his CIA controller was David Atlee, who was also the controller for the shooter, one of the shooters. And that shooter was, and people had better pay attention to this man who has come out and said that he's one of the shooters in Dealey Plaza, and that's James Files, really James Sutton. They need to listen to this man. This man, the FBI want to discredit him because they have to discredit him in order to maintain a lid on a whole lot of other stuff. But this murder does not go down. And when you start talking about pardons, like you did, if you come with these pardons and you don't have this background and all of this, will shock you that you have to pardon this many people because our government is pristine. We know we have the best government in the world, and we are a democracy, and you make all these claims about the country and so on and so forth. So that will just be stunning. But if you come from back in this place here and come all the way up to the present time period is not stunning, because you know exactly how much of what they're telling us is part of the propaganda they've been feeding and still feed today. But all countries do it, so I'm not making an indictment here as if this is some singletary type of event, because they all do it. But as a history, here's what I'm saying. And we didn't just arrive here in 2025 getting ready to read a report, the last of the files, according to what is being claimed by the president. I think he's honest enough to say that's the intent. I'm not sure what they're doing behind the doors prior to that, and what they're doing with any of the documents in their purview, and so on. They do have to protect their part of that the constituency part the constituent part that they are imbued to protect and defend, because that's what happens in government. You defend your turf and make sure that that umbilical cord is not severed, so that you left suspended out there in animation where your you have to do your own CYA. And so some of that is each one protect the other, because protecting one, you're also protecting yourself. That's what Biden was doing. Biden was protecting himself by doing some of those pardons, because if he didn't protect his family, he's out there. And the only reason he didn't have to pardon himself was because Biden won't need a pardon. Doesn't mean he didn't commit crimes. But I'm telling you, because the procedures not allow him to be brought before any tribunal at this point in time, because they did not go through the process through which the tribunal can become relevant. I'm saying that, and there's not a scholar in the country that can claim otherwise. They're not on this level. They're not on this constitutional level. They didn't go through the process. You see, we got to stop lying about the Constitution. And part of it is even in the pardoning process, because I don't think, I'm going to see what the court does with it. But I don't think you can pre-pardon. I have the document right here. It's in Article 2, Section 2, Clause 1. I don't think you can do it also is what's in Article 2, Section 2, Clause 2 either. I don't think Article 2, Section 2, which say Article 2, Section 2, Clause 2, which is the second clause of that. I don't think you can do what they're doing in terms of this these hearings they're having, where now Kash Patel is going up there to be confirmed. I don't think that is allowed by the constitutional language, because in the in Article 2, Section 2, Clause 2, where it talks about the appointment, it's the appointment clause. I don't think that the appointment clause. Here's what I would contend. You scholars, what do you think about this? In Article 2, Section 2, Clause 2, after it says, in the first part of that, it says the president shall have the power to make treaties, provided that 2/3 of the members of the Senate will concur. But he has the power to do it. But 2/3 of the senators must, in fact, agree to the treaty. But the power is there for him to do that. But 2/3 must concur to make it constitutional or legal. The word provided that is suspended from the other part of the language, where there's a involvement of the Senate. But it says in that part there that the president shall nominate, and with the advice and consent of the Senate, shall appoint. Can you tell me what they're doing, running around on Capitol Hill from one office to another, trying to cultivate the good graces of individual politicians in the Senate?
Well, I went to the Department of Justice website itself, right? And I
Okay.
said, in the question they already had it, somebody's already asked, and they have a formulated
Yeah.
response for it.
Okay.
I'll read the question first. Can the president pardon someone before they are indicted, convicted, or sentenced by a federal for a federal offense against the United States? This is their response, the Department of Justice.
Okay.
It would be highly unusual, but there have been few cases where people have been not charged with the crime were pardoned, including President Gerald Ford, pardon of Richard Nixon, and after Watergate, President Jimmy Carter's pardon of Vietnam draft dodgers, and President George H.W. Bush's pardon of Caspar Weinberger. President Donald J. Trump's pardon, this was his first term, obviously, pardoned Joseph Apria, the sheriff, Maricopa County, I think it was, after they were charged and convicted by what was prior to sentencing. So even he did that when he did make that pardon, it was still more within the boundaries. He basically said, you're not going to carry, we're not going to let the sentence be carried out.
Yeah.
Or him to be sentenced. But the other ones were preemptive. So, I mean, it does set bad precedent anyway, I think.
It does. But see, we have to get away from this idea that precedent makes it constitutional. You see, we have a lot of precedents because the precedents are what the courts do. But the problem with following the court is not the court is not the ultimate and supreme law of the land. Their job is not to, in fact, create a constitution, but to interpret it, to defend it. That's what they swore to do. The document already exists before they even arrive at the office. They must, in fact, swear to defend the document, which none of them are in fact doing. But they set these precedents up, and then all of a sudden, person is talking about the president. Well, what they're not talking about is the Constitution. Let me give you an example of that. Mark Levine was on a program this weekend, and he was talking about the tariffs that are used by that here is Donald Trump using the tariff as a vehicle to make countries comply with certain things he wants these countries to do. Colombia didn't want to take back its people. They're from your country, and we're gonna send them back, and you telling us we can't land the plane there. The heck with that. And then if you don't change your mind, we're putting a 25% tariff on your goods coming out of your country into our country, and every day is going to go up by 25%. And we are a very important and strategic partner, trading partner, and they couldn't allow that. Otherwise, their economy collapsing, and the president's in trouble, and that's a bigger thing than letting some folks back into the country that belong there in the first place. So they capitulated. But the question now here's what Mark Levine did after beginning to tell us that this is what somebody did before that, and it was used by Jefferson, and used by that, and used by the other. Okay, fine. Here's the question: what does the Constitution say about it? That's the argument. Yeah, there are precedents that are set, but you see, that's that's why we're so far off base here in this country, because sometimes the precedents are not constitutionally authorized.
But here's what I've pulled it up for ChatGPT, and that was an interesting story. I asked this before.
Okay.
I typed in it before I give you that reading I described.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay. Here are a few points about here. I said about the presidential pardon. Here are a few key points about presidential pardons.
Okay.
A pardon can be issued before charges are filed. The Supreme Court wrote a case ex parte Garland 1866 ruled that president's pardon power extends to offenses committed but not yet prosecuted. A famous example is President Gerald Ford. We already alluded to that. Pardon of Richard Nixon in 1974. But I asked for to make a distinction between pardon and commutation.
Okay. All right. Okay.
A pardon is different from a commutation. A pardon forgives a crime and restores civil rights like voting or holding office. It can be issued before or after a conviction. A commutation only reduces and eliminates a sentence, but does not erase the conviction itself. Limits the pardon power. It only applies to federal crimes, not state crimes. It cannot be used in cases of impeachment. So, a president cannot pardon themselves or others to stop an impeachment process. So that's why it might be more logical for pardons to come after a conviction. The law allows them at any stage, including before someone's even charged. Okay. But, I
Yeah.
mean, but I mean, this is according to Chat GPT, but of course, he's not. This is not the legal at Chat GPT.
Yeah, here's the Constitution. Here's what the Constitution says. This is look. The only authorization that allows the government to act is the permission giver, and the permission giver is the Constitution of the United States. Without its permission, you cannot act. The government cannot act legally. Now, all that stuff about the authorization and the legitimization of different things the government is in fact doing, I have the Constitution right here. I know it better than most, probably most. I don't know if anyone knows it that knows it better in the country. So let me read it to you. And in the pardoning clause, see if you hear any of these caveats they've added to it, and show me what the caveats are in the document. In Article 2, Section 2, it says this, and this is in Clause 1. The President shall, and I didn't bring my glasses, I got to hold it closer, shall be Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Army and Navy of the United States and of the militia of the United States you don't have these bad eyes that I have. You have to bear with me for a minute. When called into the armed services of the United States, he may require the opinions of, don't leave that in the words here, sometimes you need your glasses here, of the principal officers and of the department. Let's see, I'm going to get to the relevant part. I want to see if I can find where, yeah, this part here. And he shall have power to grant, let's see, reprieves and pardons. Listen to this part here carefully. For offenses against the United States, except in cases of impeachment. So that part, you see, you can't stop a process that's already been constitutionalized, and the impeachment process is constitutionalized in Articles 1 and 2. So the president can grant pardons and reprieves if it's said in here that you can do pre-pardons, then we're on the same page. But a pre-pardon means that you've anticipated an act that has not occurred yet, and you cannot, in fact, pardon for something that does not exist. If I have not been charged with a crime You can't pardon me for that. Because the pardon is condemnation of the event that has yet to occur. I want to see what the court does with that, because what the language calls for is pardoning. It does not say anything about how do you pardon before the pardon is needed for an act that is yet to be brought up for anyone to be put in jeopardy, is what I'm saying. See, the reason why that's a problem. Listen to me here. The reason that's a problem is because it's kind of like another way of getting at the same thing by looking at when you pardon and then you take away the jeopardy. You see, you can make them now testify, because once you take away the liability in terms of testifying against yourself, when the pardon can be a curse now, because once you do the pardon as they've done for all these person that Joe Biden did the pardon for, what you can do now is then make them testify about what happened to those files and so on and so forth. There's no jeopardy if they say that they did X, Y, and Z. The jeopardy is if they lie about it, because that's an act that's been now committed beyond the pardon that's already been put on the table, and this action is one they're committing in the aftermath of that. So what I'm saying here is that you have to look at pre and prior and post. The question is, what's the present state? Because the pardon can be done for a state that doesn't exist. How do you pardon from someone from an action that he's yet to be charged for? There's no pre in the language is what I'm saying. Now, if we want to be constitutionalists, if we want to be constitutionally grounded, we got to stop making addendums to the language. Okay, I know we got to get out of here, but the language either says what it says or it doesn't say what it says. And I don't know of any strict constitutionalist that's willing to say the document says what it says, it means what it says, and it doesn't say anything that it does not say. It says what it says, means what it says, and it does not mean what it does not say. And when we get to that level of understanding and have the Constitution speak for itself, we'll be on much firmer ground than we are right now, where anything goes, where it's just word of mouth kind of stuff coming out of the mouths of members of the Supreme Court. I'm not buying into that. The Constitution can speak for itself. Okay, I got to get out of here. We're running over time, but go back and do some research here, and then I think you'll begin to see a lot of things. A lot of people are open their eyes up, and I think you'll come to another conclusion that you come to at this point. Until next week, I want you to follow your dream. If you don't follow your dream, you'll never know what's on the other side of the rainbow.